Michael Hagins.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you well.
Excellent.
Michael, this is Jay Michaels. If I'm on the line, you're on the air. But you know that already because this is your second time round on the Passion Pit podcast.
It is, yep, and I'm happy to do it one more time.
Now, the last time we spoke, we were talking about your brilliance as a playwright, doing original works based on historical figures and facts and things like that. This time we're going way back in history. Another thing which you've become very well known for is your work in Shakespeare.
Yes, yep, I'm a huge fan of Shakespeare. I've been doing it for a very long time now.
Now, you just finished a marathon of readings on his canon, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it was my 8x8 The Shakespeare series, where I had roughly 8 shows left in the canon to complete before I did the entire canon, and I was able to finish the entire canon on August 3rd, 2019.
Oh, I'm so jealous. I think I've only gotten through about a third or half of his canon, so I'm impressed with someone who reached all 37. And we're going to talk about whether it's 37 or not in a little bit. But first, you're also right now, I always see your name in terms of Shakespeare projects, and a really great one that's touring the parks now is Shakespeare in the Park from Shakespeare Sports, and it's Two Gentlemen of Verona.
Yes, exactly. I gave Carrie my script that I've been using for a couple of years now, and the idea about Two Gentlemen is that I kind of solve the problem play issues with it.
Really? Okay, so tell us about the production and tell us what you've contributed to this production.
Well, Carrie came to me about a couple of months ago. She wanted to do Two Gentlemen of Verona, and she knew I had done it in the past as a director and as a fight director. And the play's ending is very problematic because it ends very non-PC, is the best way I could say it.
Yeah, well put.
Thank you. So I said I had a way of solving it, which is through random violence. And she liked the idea. Yeah, that's correct.
That's great. I'm sorry, go on.
No problem. So, because I worked with her on As You Like It as a fight director the year before that. And so the idea was to kind of fix the issues of the play that come up. There are a few holes in the plot. And I filled them with different styles of sword fighting, different styles of violence, different chase scenes happening in the middle of Act 5. So it kind of corrects some of the missing elements of it. And so I sent her my copy of the script. She liked what I put together, and off she went. She directed it, casted it, and now it's touring around the city right now.
And you're in it also? I'm
not in it, actually. I did the fight for it.
Okay, well, then all your fisticuffs are in it. This is really interesting. So you've essentially handed her, the first time we're going to see this type of ending for the show.
I would say so. I mean, I've done the show before, my version of it.
Oh, right.
My version had more swords. This one here really only has just sightseeing, just fisticuffs involved. Oh, just unarmed combat. Well,
you're in parks there, so you don't need to swing a sword somewhere and teach a kid how to shave a little too soon.
Exactly.
How's the show going? How is it looking? How is the audience receiving it? I know it began just a couple of days ago. How's it going now?
I believe it's going quite well. I mean, when I did see it, the actors were having a good time with it, and I'm really proud of them because teaching the combat, they really took to it. They were very excited to get this new variation of the show to be done, and it was just great to teach them all these new things to experience in the show.
Did you get any opposition? Do you get any purists? I've had many purists because I love to tinkle with Shakespeare. And did you get any purists who said, "Oh no, it has to be done this way. You can't change it." Anything?
Thank God, no, because I would hate for someone to be a purist about this particular show.
Right.
In terms of the way it ends, I can't see anybody in 2019 wanting the show to end in its natural state. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me to have that kind of personality trait to want these two friends to just make up without any kind of consequence for the actions that Proteus did out of nowhere. Like, something has to happen. Something has to move along to make sure that everyone at least gets somewhat of a happy ending.
Right. And also, women are looked at very differently nowadays, and just in general, this is not the time to play it the same way, if you will.
Exactly, because times have changed, and women are no longer subservient, they're no longer silent, and the play ends with neither Silvia nor Julia having any lines whatsoever. Like, once Proteus has done this horrible action towards Silvia, Valentine steps in, Julia reveals herself, and then it is all about Valentine getting forgiveness from the Duke, and we never see Proteus ever get any comeuppance from Silvia or Julia in that regard. But in my version, that changes. Now, Proteus gets comeuppance from Valentine, and he gets comeuppance from Julia. And so, something has to happen in 2019 now. You can't just do such actions without some kind of consequence, without some kind of change in the character to make them realize how bad they've done.
Do you think that's necessary across the boards? Or across the bards, as the case may be, we're in a new world. People are vastly different. You can't play Othello the same way. You can't play Shylock the same way. Do you think we need to re-examine Shakespeare and say, okay, what do we need to look at, or do we dare play it the way it always is in every version?
I think it should be looked at. Re-examine is a good way to put it, I think, because I don't want to redefine the play because it's been written for so long and held up in such a great regard. But on the same token, we absolutely can re-examine how women are portrayed in the play. Like, for example, Teaming of the Shrew, how that play ends with Catherine.
Right.
I've seen some plays pull it straight up, and people get offended by it. I've seen some plays play with the endings, like Catherine has a little more power in the end, or how it plays the dynamic of their relationship, and it shows how happy they'll be together. So I think we can definitely re-examine how women are portrayed, and do it in a more successful way, because it makes the play accessible to everybody, because we're not wanting to change the script or the dialogue or the text or even the plot.
Of course.
All I want to do personally for me, and I'm sure a lot of people who love Shakespeare feel the same way, make it more accessible for a modern audience. Make it more accessible so that a woman watching the play doesn't feel like that they're being portrayed in a very subservient or negative light.
I'm glad you said that. I've always been a proponent of whomever wrote these plays, that they were a bit clairvoyant. They knew that one day the Moor, if you will, would be called African American and have great respect. That the Jew would not just be a moneylender. That's also a character that needed to be different. When you look at Christopher Marlowe's depictions of ethnicities and women, they're awful when you really get down to it, as opposed to Shakespeare. Do you think the Shakespeare, quote unquote, how can I put this, thought that one day the audiences would change, and so he created these characters so that they can be manipulated into better ways?
Well, if you look at the scripts, the way they're designed, they're made to be a director's play. They're made to have interpretation open for however you want to design it or put it. It's why people like modernize Shakespeare all the time. People can find different time periods, different aesthetics, different genres, put the plays into it and makes them all work. There's no other playwright that you could do that with such accuracy for all the plays through the canon. Almost every single play, you could find some modern adaptation of it, and it works. And in terms of a character like Shylock in Merchant of Venice, I've always thought Shylock has a comic villain. A comic villain who just goes too far in his work. And yes, he is Jewish. And yes, there are so many anti-Semitic marks in the play. But you can also do that play to where Shylock is portrayed the way he's supposed to be portrayed, which is a villain who goes too far and gets his comeuppance in the end.
Right.
And his Jewish nature has nothing to do with his characters, and it has nothing to do with his personality. He just happens to be Jewish.
Well put. Now let's also talk in terms of Two Gentlemen. It's where Shakespeare seems to have become stereotypical in the parks, thanks to Joseph Papp and his own Shakespeare in the Park. We've come to accept that. What are the challenges when you do outdoor theater, and especially when you do Shakespeare in the parks? What are the challenges?
Well, I've been a veteran of outdoor theater for going on almost 15 years now. One of my first Shakespeare shows was outside, and the big challenge for me has always been the outdoor elements, the noises, the bugs, the children, the helicopters, the sirens. There's always some going on around you, and it can be hard for an actor to really concentrate and find those emotional moments, especially if you're staying in the park playing Othello. you're having this emotional moment about someone betraying you. All of a sudden you hear, "Hey!" from a playground, like, a block across. And so you have to kind of maintain that mentality to stay in the moment and not get broken from it. And so any actor who can do outdoor theater, deserves a bunch of respect, because you have to project your voice out there so that everyone can hear you. You got to be physical enough with your body so they understand your emotional range physically, not just vocally. And then you have to block out all the noises and all the goings on around you. And so to put on a great show with so many distractions going on has to be an impossible task. But yet, you look around the city in the summertime and even going into the fall, there are so many wonderful shows that get put up and are just so fantastic despite all the elements I just mentioned.
When do you have to acknowledge the elements? When do you have to acknowledge the obstacles around you? In a modern play, it's kind of easy. Okay, you're in character, and suddenly, a helicopter goes by. You can almost acknowledge it in some way if the audience does. What do you do in Shakespeare? What do you do when you're in, oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I, and suddenly an ambulance rolls by? What do you do?
Well, it depends on the play, because honestly, I've always done it where if I can't beat it with my voice, I'll just pause. I'll pause and take a moment to think and let it go by, because one thing I did learn when I was working for New England Shakespeare, these distractions are going to happen. You have to acknowledge them. You can't just ignore them from happening. So you have to at least acknowledge that they're happening, because the audience is going to look away anyway. They're going to be distracted. They're going to be pulled away. So you may as well go with it and just wait for it to pass, or keep talking through it and just know that those moments are going to be a little bit abbreviated. So maybe you go a little bit slower. Maybe you take a little beat between the sentences. Maybe you have a little more physicality in your body to kind of counteract that. But the idea is that I think you should at least acknowledge it, because it's happening. It's happening in front of you. It's happening to the side of you. It's happening behind you. You have to at least get through it. Excellent.
Now, how about Shakespeare Sports? You're a veteran there. You were in last year's production, I think, of As You Like It, if I remember correctly.
I played Charles the Wrestler and another small part of William, because I did the wrestling scene in As You Like It. And I just mentioned to Carrie, I was already busy with other stuff going on, so I kind of want a smaller part just so I could concentrate and be able to build the fight properly and not worry about having to memorize lines or find moments too much.
Right. Were you involved in Her Tempest that just passed?
Yes.
Wow.
Actually, it was King Alonzo in the production. Although I only did for 2 shows. I had to leave the show for the last performance due to an illness in my family.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Able to. No, thank you. Everything's okay now, though. Luckily, the tragedy passed quickly. Luckily.
Oh, good.
But on the same token, I got to play Alonzo for the rehearsals and for 2 of the shows, and it was very interesting to get back into the idea of using a scroll and finding the text to be your guide into what's happening. And King Alonzo is a pretty underrated emotional part, because he spends most of the play looking for his son, and there's a nice emotional range that he goes through, having to still be in command and still have this control over Antonio and Sebastian, knowing that they're up to something, but also have this goal to find Ferdinand and get out of this island so that he can get back to hopefully having his son become the king someday.
Right.
And worrying about his daughter also, who just got married to somebody else in a whole different country that he may never see again.
So you're a regular repertory member here. How do you like Shakespeare Sports? How do you like working with Carrie Edel Isaacman? How's the company?
I enjoy working with her. We have a good rapport when it comes to director and fight director. I've come in sometimes to help her with scenes, whatnot, and just kind of help her keep things moving, because I have a lot of knowledge in the plays she does. And so it's nice to collaborate with her when it comes to these works. And, and someday I'd love to direct for her at some point. I'd love to actually direct a play, in this style, so that, I could really get a good grasp of what's happening. And plus, there's so many plays I would love to direct for the first time or even again. I just love doing Shakespeare. So whenever anyone has the ability, has the space, the funding, and the chance to do Shakespeare, I love to jump on an opportunity best I can.
No, I completely agree. Now, you say about their style, they work with scrolls, yes?
Yes. The style is supposed to be unrehearsed. The idea is that you get a scroll, you get your part, all you have are your lines, and 3 lines of the cue before you. So make sure you have to pay attention to what people are saying. You can't just tune out while someone's having a speech. You have to listen to what they're saying and take in what they're saying. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that about the cue line. So essentially, you have Elizabethan sides.
Basically, yeah. Because what it was back then, there were no copy machines back then, so you could make, everyone could have a copy of the entire script, and plus actors worked at different places all the time. So you didn't want to have someone having your full script, because they could go to another theater, take your work, and put it on as if it's yours. So what they would do is the playwright would write the full play, and then take the lines of each character and their cue and just give them on a piece of paper what their lines were. So you have no idea what anybody's saying to you until it's time for you to speak, essentially.
So this was out of necessity because they couldn't very well write, a 200-page script every single time, and also to sort of their own version of copyright to make sure that no one could steal their work.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, you never know. Someone could, if you give a copy of a script to somebody, next thing you know, your name could be scratched off, put your name in, and then you have a whole new play that makes you 20 pounds out of nowhere.
Wow. I was just speaking to Alexander Carney, and he's doing a one-man show about Philip Henslowe, who was probably the very first theatrical producer, if you will, of the Elizabethan era. And he was saying that they only had about 8 hours rehearsal altogether for each project. So I guess that the scrolls were a necessity there as well.
Yeah.
Now you bring up a really interesting point, and I always try to talk to Shakespeare authorities, of which I consider you, this question. Yes, someone can get a copy of the script and change just enough and hand it somewhere. That's why we have the bad quarto of Hamlet. That's why we have two versions of Romeo and Juliet. That's why we have so many different versions, and that's why essentially there are, we say 37 plays, but it became 38, it became 39, it became 47. We were up to something in the 50s at one point in terms of how many plays were attributed to William Shakespeare. So let me ask you, there's a Shakespeare conspiracy. Do you think there was a William Shakespeare?
I believe there was, yes. I think William Shakespeare did exist. I think he was born. I think he did write plays. I think he also acted in his plays. And I think he ended with The Tempest, and I believe he died. So, yeah.
So do you think it was just thievery that has created this conspiracy? Because everyone had a chance to... Someone stole a script, and that was the end of that. Or they just wrote his name on it for effect.
I mean, I think it happens in almost every playwright. Every playwright, had his issues and people saying that they didn't write this, they didn't write that, they want to take credit for this. And I just think that, it feels like way too much of a conspiracy. I think you have to think of more things that could have happened as opposed to what really happened. And there is DNA proof that Shakespeare existed, so it makes sense to me that he just did. And this whole idea of having to find these different figures, I think I read some of the conspiracy theories about this, about a certain lord who might have written these plays, and Shakespeare took credit because he was a jerk actor who just was down on his luck. And I just feel like it's harder to create these new stories instead of just saying, you know what, he existed, we have the proof that he wrote these plays, he just wrote the plays, the end.
What's the proof? What proof guides you? What proof guided you into your decision?
Just based on different books I've read, different texts I've read, and and also you see the different first folio copies that have his name signed to it, and there's enough copies of each script out there with his name on it just for me to say, yes, there was a Shakespeare. Yes, he wrote these.
And what about all the facts that they're saying about how his children were illiterate and there's no manuscripts with his name on it, and of course he's called the upstart crow. What do you think? That's just jealousy? That's just anger on their part?
I think it's jealousy. I think it's anger. I think it's those people trying to make a story up and create something else. I think it's just garbage to me. I think it's all just people want a story to make something happen. It's in a way almost like Richard III. I mean, the play Richard III was all about the propaganda of what somebody was compared to what they really were. Richard III never had a hunchback. Richard III was never as cruel as Lady Anne as the play says he was. And there's even proof that he didn't kill the two kids in the towers. I mean, in the end, it's all a story. It's all propaganda.
I got to agree with you there. Michael Grunwald wrote a biography of Richard III, back then, actually, it was right after his passing, and basically he was a paranoid king with scoliosis, and suddenly we've turned him into this horror movie character.
Yep, exactly, and Shakespeare knew that. He didn't. I mean, the history was definitely there, but at the same token, he's writing about Queen Elizabeth's grandfather, who happened to be Henry VII, who happened to be Richmond, who happened to be the hero of that play. So, if you're going to create a hero of the play, you have to have a villain, and so Richmond's villain is this hunchbacked, evil king who stole the throne from his brother and murdered all these people to get there.
Wow. If Carrie came to you tomorrow and said, "Okay, I want you to direct a play for Shakespeare Sports," what would it be?
Off the top of my head, I love Titus Andronicus, honestly. I love that play, and I think it's a great show for the outdoors. There are a lot of things you can do with it. But, I mean, that's just off the top of my head because I've been thinking about Titus and, like, different concepts I have in mind for it. But I could do almost really any play off the top of my head. I could do Henry V. I could do Romeo and Juliet. I could do As You Like It. I mean, all these plays I just have read recently alone and just love them. And also, I went to Merry Wives of Windsor in January, and I would love to revisit that because I was so busy producing the Shakespeare series, I never got to really concentrate on it and give it the attention I want it deserved as a director. So I would love to go back and look at it one more time and really iron out those comic moments that I never got to really hone the last time.
I have never known you to not be a workaholic, so what's the next project coming down your pike?
Well, right now I'm doing a lot of fight direction. I'm working with a high school on the show She Kills Monsters, and I'm trying to get another job doing fight direction for Romeo and Juliet. And then I'm as a playwright, I'm trying to get my work out there. I'm submitting to different theaters and different directors to see if they're interested in producing it in 2020. In terms of Shakespeare, I would like to revisit some other plays because there are plays that I've only fight directed. I've never got to direct or act in them. So I'm looking at having a mini version of the series next year with 3 stage readings of these 3 plays I've never acted or directed in. I've only fight directed, which would be Henry VIII, Troilus and Cressida, and King John. So I'm looking at doing those 3 readings next year at some point.
Henry VIII, is that part of the original canon?
It is, yes.
It is interesting. I don't recall Henry VIII part of the original canon of the 37. Is it really?
It really is, yeah.
Wow. Okay, I'm now embarrassed. Okay, I have to go back now and look at that. That's very cool. Michael, thank you so much. Yes.
Well, actually, I want to say one thing. The original canon for me actually is 38 because I'm Henry VIII. So the original canon was 36 plays actually, because Henry VIII was one of them. 37 and 38 actually were Pericles and Two Noble Kinsmen, which were added about 10, 15 years after the first folio came out.
Right. And
then about 10 years ago, they actually added Edward III to that canon as well. So there's 39 plays in the modern canon.
Okay, so now it's Edward III, and Henry VIII was part of the original 36.
Yeah.
And it never was taken out.
Nope, never was.
Okay. I've been away from Shakespeare far too long. I need to go back and look at my canon. But yeah, I knew all about Two Noble. But wow, and Edward III also. Wow, I just learned something. That's great. Michael,
actually, I just did it. I just did it for the Shakespeare series as well. I did a play plus one, and I basically cut in a 1 hour version of Edward III.
A 1 hour version, as opposed to how long was it?
2.5 hours.
That's quite an edit.
Yes, and it is a very long, drawn-out play, and a lot of it does not make a lot of sense. And there's arguments that he wrote this part and that part, and some could contribute Thomas Kidd to about 60% of it. Mm-hmm. Marlowe, I think, with like 15 to 20% of it. So I mean, it's a collaborative play among a different bunch of playwrights. But I figured, well, if I want to go for the full canon, I want to go for perfection. I have to add it on, so as a play plus one of the Shakespeare series.
That's great. That is great. All right, Michael, I'm not necessarily going to say goodbye. I'm going to say nice talking to you, because you're going to come back and we're going to have a long conversation about Shakespeare. I would love to hear your thoughts on the canon, on the different folios, on, as you say, about the collaborative pieces. It's always been, it's been I won't say a hobby, that's the poor word. It's been a journey of mine in terms of the Shakespeare conspiracy. So someone like you, I would definitely speak to again on such a topic. But thank you so much for telling us about Two Gentlemen of Verona. I'll make sure everybody knows about your gorgeous and safe fight scenes in parks throughout New York. It's going to be in Central Park. It's at Astoria. It's up in Fort Tryon. It's all over the place. So I'm definitely going to make sure they know about Shakespeare Sports, Two Gentlemen of Verona, and the authoritative Michael Hagins' role within it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'll talk to you soon. Ciao.
Have a good day.